I recently got into a spat on Twitter after suggesting that the latest batch of superhero slop from Marvel and Sony wasn't exactly the greatest thing in the world to watch. Naturally, the local Cope and Seethe inhabitants of the Disney casting couch thought I was being a little too mean and decided to pay me a visit. Now typically I don't really care what the masses of cattle think, since bad media often makes a lot of money, even if these films didn't. But popular products do tend to make their viewers rather bold in their approaches, telling people with any genuine concerns or criticisms that their negativity isn't needed nor appreciated. Touch grass, see a therapist, go kill yourself. You know, just standard internet things, nothing really to get too uppity about. But there was one post that got my attention. Firstly, because it did ratio me in the comments, and secondly, because it's such an incredibly stupid thing to say. Hating popular things doesn't make you an interesting person. Now, before I dig into this and explain why I think it's stupid, I'd like to highlight some truth in this statement. Blind hatred of anything, whether it's popular or not, is an incredibly silly thing to do. Failing to form an intelligent, insightful, well-thought-out and articulate opinion on any given topic before concluding that you dislike said topic is incredibly dismissive and is likely to make people disregard you for good reason. You offer nothing meaningful in terms of discourse, and you likely don't even know why you dislike the thing you hate. I wonder if there's a theme here. I believe the kids call this going off of vibes. However, there are exceptions even to this line of thinking. For example, people who dislike or hate a franchise or even a particular genre. Why? Well, because of their repeated exposure to said franchise or genre. They've developed an opinion on an earlier set of entries, determined the reason for why they didn't like them or thought they were quite bad, and as a result decided to not engage with any further material, placing them all under the same obligatory banner. After all, if the new entries repeat the same offenses that made this person quit the franchise in the first place, what reason would they have to return or even to think improvements have been made? Funnily enough, this person is me. This is what I thought of Star Wars after watching shows like The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and I think Ahsoka. Can't really remember. Let's not even dare bring up those movies. They all suffered from the same childish, bland, boring, abysmal writing that's infected this franchise for decades, and I kind of had enough. I didn't bother watching any of the other shows and assumed they would all be terrible because why wouldn't they be? It's Star Wars. It's all bad. This was until Andor came out. Initially, I treated the show the same, like a plague I needed to isolate myself from. I had no interest in it. It was a prequel series for a forgettable prequel film. Why should I watch it? I needed people I trusted, people who shared many of the same views on media that I do, to convince me to give the show a shot. And I'm glad I did, because after the first 15 minutes, I was hooked, and I've been a stern supporter of the show since season 1, actively defending it from detractors. Now this may seem like a needless rant from the subject of this video, the video itself being incredibly needless and pointless, but I was, in my feelings. But there is a point to this story. If I was just another Star Wars fan and watched every single project they released, irrespective of quality, there would be nothing special about me watching Andor, because of course I would. If I was just another blind hater, I wouldn't have watched it, because it's part of a franchise I thought was garbage. There is nothing interesting about what I have to say, one way or the other. What makes my thoughts on the show interesting, at least I think so, and what makes Andor special is because of how well written it is, and because of how much it stands out from the rest of the garbage. I can literally talk about the show for hours, explaining in detail why I think it's good, what it does well, what it does poorly, the things that stick out to me the most, the things that I enjoyed the most, the character writing, the plot, the sense of scale, the beautiful environments and settings and shots and CGI. I can gush about this show for a good minute. Andor, when it first came out, was a sort of cult classic, as it didn't do as well as most other shows in its franchise, at least initially. But after the release of Season 2 and the positive word of mouth the first season had over years, the show managed to finally acquire its audience and exploded in terms of popularity. Now, almost anywhere you go on the internet, you will find people thoroughly gushing about how good the show is. And the part that makes that interesting, at least for me, is that many of these people are the same ones who disliked the other, more popular projects at the time. With that little story out of the way, we can get back to this initial term. Hating popular things doesn't make you an interesting person. On the surface, this feels like an agreeable statement to make. Simply disliking something and not giving any justification for said dislike is just boring. However, to quote a friend of mine, every person who has some positive bias toward the media or negative bias against the person it is directed towards will rally behind this statement, despite it being completely hollow. It adds nothing of substance to the conversation. It's a banner that can be rallied behind by people that like the thing in question, hence the massive amounts of likes it has. Flip it on its head, or any permutation of the same statement from different angles. I'd argue liking something popular doesn't make you interesting either. I'd argue hating something unpopular doesn't make you interesting either. Nor does liking something unpopular. It is literally the most basic form of ad hominem and a blanket response to any type of criticism. The kind of response that doesn't actually attack the point at hand, but rather the intent of the person behind it, real or imagined. It's monkeys throwing poop at you and laughing because you have poop on you. Bro said he hates green bananas and the green banana squad rolled up. The reason why I say it's non-useful and hollow is because it's literally just there to enforce tribalism and bias confirmation, and, to a lesser extent, farm attention due to the prevalence of users that will see it and press like, such as the 12-year-olds who saw this film in theaters on the weekend and loved Spider-Man. Now, my little Uvuki needs a big hug because he nailed it on the head. The exact same thing can be said about people who like or love things that are popular, especially if it's blind love, the inability to consider why you like this thing in question while providing any form of reasoning to support your bias, or, as is the case here, the inability to understand why others would find it detestable. Well, maybe they have some ideas and just chose to ignore those. Now granted, I didn't exactly say why I thought these films were bad, that's on me, but to immediately jump to conclusions like claiming I'm a film purist who only watches 1920s black and white silent films, that I'm incapable of having fun, that I'm rage baiting, or that I just didn't even see the films before making my inflammatory remarks. How does what I say here translate to these kinds of judgments? And yeah, I see you, Wispy, you and your Gen Z equivalent of the Facebook dad PFP. Although, notice how none of these people are asking me why I think these films are bad. Their immediate reaction is to defend and to deflect. I can't possibly think these films are bad. I actually have terrible taste. One of these films made $2 billion. How can it be bad? They are all having more fun than I am, so I must be wrong. That particular message, that type of message, is my favorite, because I actually had a lot of fun watching Brand New Day. Just not for the reasons you'd think. Now, I hope I'm making some sort of point clear here. The point being that just because you like a popular piece of media doesn't inherently make you more interesting than someone who dislikes it. It's just lowest common denominator thinking. My initial post is just me saying shit. I don't ever really expect my posts to blow up. It's never blown up before, and it's not why I do this. But notice how the comments are the exact same style of argument being made, which is to say they are just saying shit. I guess you could suggest they are matching my energy, but if these films are that good, right, to the point where it's kinda obvious what makes them good, they are just objectively great films, okay? Surely you would want to question someone who thinks they suck, right? You would like to know why they don't hold the popular opinion. Because if I met someone who thinks The Lord of the Rings, the greatest trilogy of films ever made, not necessarily the best individual films, but rather as a whole package, was a badly made series of films, I for sure am going to ask them every knick-knack and paddywhack for why they think that. Because why wouldn't I? I'd be fascinated to hear what they have to say, no matter what it is. I need to know if they may hold incorrect views, if they watched the movies wrong, if they genuinely didn't pay attention to anything that was shown on screen, if they think the orcs were allegorical. Some of you may remember that Cinematic Venom review of the films. Now, despite how terrible his points were, you can't deny he was incredibly interesting to watch simply because it was a take that was so far from being the norm that it demanded at least some additional investigation. But here, there's nothing. No questions, no interest, no whimsy, no general mischievous curiosity. No one is making an argument. No one is trying to see my side if they are pro-Marvel. But for some reason, because I am being negative and because I don't like the slop Marvel's trying to sell me, whether it's in the films, the shows, or the games, I am the uninteresting one. Ignoring the fact I probably hold an intrinsically more interesting opinion based solely on the fact that it's just not a normal one to have. But these people, who all share the exact same line of thinking by the hundreds of millions globally, they are the interesting ones. If you are one of the individuals who just blindly loves these movies, no matter how badly written they are, how poorly they do at the box office when compared to other films in their franchise, how frankly forgettable they are, or how little relevancy they have in the broader pop culture, the real don't ask questions, just consume product and then get excited for next product troopers, I think you are quite possibly the least interesting kind of person there is. The kind of person who blatantly ignores criticism, shout out terms like nitpicking to discredit unpopular views about problematic storytelling, or just outright refusing to hear them. What do you even have to say that warrants any kind of response? Especially if I've seen these films and have a very good idea as to why they suck. Not to mention that you should just look at the kind of praise these movies receive. Tell me it's not just the most flaccid thing you've seen. Very rarely will these people make any attempts at analysis or in-depth discussion, because the moment they do, the moment they try and dig into these properties to analyze them, to see what makes them tick, they start seeing problems. The amount of broad generalization that needs to be done in order to still like these movies is actual insanity. Most of the time we will see people praising things like camera work, costume accuracy, fight scenes, most importantly, how it made them feel. But ask them about the writing, ask them about the plot, about the characters, about general basic consistency, and watch them fumble any and all talking points because they didn't have anything ready to go in the McDonald's dollar menu of talking points. Now, you could potentially hold an interesting view. I'm not one to argue, I'm always right, and I'm open-minded enough to hear someone out most times. But what can you say that isn't just immediately dismissive of what I have to say? I have never known members of the toxic positivity crowd to really be open to hearing out others with differing opinions, especially about something as insipid and mindless as a modern superhero movie. Most times I see people praising these films, whether it be Marvel or DC, they tend to overlook the glaring issues at play, handwave most criticisms, and call the haters all sorts of colourful names because you genuinely have nothing more exciting to say. However, on the flip side, I found people who didn't like the popular thing at the time to have significantly more interesting and insightful things to say about their experiences watching these films and shows, whether it's comic book fans complaining about adaptational changes they disliked, fans of older media in the franchise who despise everything that's been done to appease the mindset of man-children in the late 20s to early 30s, or just people who don't like it when you take advantage of someone's body without asking for their consent. Why do I find them more interesting inherently? Well, because it isn't blind hatred. These people aren't disliking something for the sake of it, even if they were entirely right to do so. A lot of these people put a decent bit of thought into their issues, helped entirely by the fact that these properties are ripe with terrible inconsistencies and morally ambiguous decisions. Personally, I think they are flat out evil most of the time, but I will save those thoughts for actual analysis. It also makes the times that they do praise something, such as Andor, stand out, because if something has managed to be made in this modern media hellscape that actually gets past that initial smell test, it then means there's something worthwhile to talk about for this particular project for all parties involved. And it's not inherently negative either, which is cool, It's always nice to praise something once in a while. Now, this video is just a little bit of manic energy I had built up after reading through these comments, and I felt like I needed to direct it towards something constructive while it was still fresh. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it really. I wanted to talk about how pointless this term is. It's non-useful and hollow because it's literally just there to enforce tribalism and bias confirmation, and it can easily and quite frankly be used towards people who like the popular thing too. It doesn't make you special, and it doesn't make you interesting. Saying you liked the $2 billion movie means nothing to me. especially if it is the safe thing to say. There's no grit, there's no teeth. I could even argue you are just doing it because other people are doing it too. Now, this kind of thinking is meant for these people, right? If you are just the average movie-going viewer, you don't interact in these kinds of spheres, then this is not meant for you. Am I annoyed? Yeah, a little bit, but like, that's on me. That's for me to deal with. I'm mostly just talking about people who, for the love of me, just cannot shut the fuck up, no matter where I go. But Shandy, what about actual content? You've been dormant for a while. Where are the videos? I don't know. I don't really have an excuse. I kind of just have been whatever for the last few months, you know? However, the TASM video is maybe done in the next 2 weeks. Birdman video shortly after. I also wanted to dig into one of these more annoying toxic positivity people properly and actually provide examples and references for why I think they're wrong. I wonder if you can guess who. And just crack on with whatever else I have in the bag. So, yeah, thank you for listening to my ridiculous rantings, and I hope you had just a little bit of fun. Probably wasn't at all, but, I mean, the video got me in the mood, so, see you. Take care. Bye-bye. Mwah.